All praise, all glory, all honors most certainly due to the Most High, the God of the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And peace to you in the name of Jesus. This is your brother Elisha Israel of the household of faith. I count it truly a blessing each and every time that I can come before you to preach the word of God. Never do I count it as a light thing to do so. All right, brothers and sisters, I want to get right into today's lesson, and it's going to be short. And the title is What Believers Should Consider About Thanksgiving. Again, that title is What Believers Should Consider About Thanksgiving. You know, we're upon that time. We've left the feast days of God, and we've embarked into this last portion of these pagan days. They're right back to back. You have Halloween, you have Thanksgiving, and you have Christmas and New Year's. Well, this is just saying because there's a lot of debate about this day. And these are just some things I want to go over, just some things you should consider about Thanksgiving. Because a lot of times people don't put Thanksgiving in the same category as these other pagan days. And the reason that is because of the false narrative that is often believed about Thanksgiving, that even historians sometimes debate about, okay? When you look at the false narrative, you could say, oh, it's just a day about Thanksgiving. You know, they survived the winter, as if that's the end all. If that's the case, then technically, you know, how is there something wrong with this day? It's like almost in the same category, even though it's been made religious. It's almost like in the same category as as a Labor Day, right? And it can't be you can't look at it like you would look at Christmas as pagan origins. Well, I'm gonna just go over some things. I'm gonna be brief. Just some things we need to consider when dealing with this day. Again, what believers should consider about Thanksgiving. First of all, let's just go and look at the origins of Thanksgiving. This is from New World Book, the World Book Encyclopedia, in regard to Thanksgiving. It says Thanksgiving in the United States and Canada, a day is set aside each year as Thanksgiving Day. On this day, people give thanks with feasting and prayer for the blessings they may have received during the year. The first, let me go down a little bit. On one of the first Thanksgiving observances in America was entirely religious and did not involve feasting. On December 4, 1619, English settlers arrived at Berkeley Plantation on the James River near what is now Charles City. Okay, then it says Charles City, Virginia. Sorry, the group's charter required that the day of arrival be observed yearly as a day of thanksgiving to God. The first New England Thanksgiving was celebrated less than a year after the Plymouth colonists had settled in the new land. The first dreadful winter in Massachusetts had nearly killed half of the members of the colony. Okay, and it says, but New Hope grew up in the summer of 1621. The corn harvest brought rejoicing. Governor William Bradford decreed that a 3-day feast be held. A Thanksgiving Day for prayer as well as celebration was decreed by Governor Bradford for July 30th, 1623. The women of the colony spent many days preparing for the feast. The children helped by bringing roast on spits in front of open fires. Indians brought wild turkey and venison, deer meat. The men of the colony brought geese, ducks, and fish. Okay. Now these in this case, if I'm not mistaken, these are the same ones that sometime when King's Philip War, they you know, it led to the massacring of thousands of this particular tribe. Okay, anyway, it says the women served the meat and fish with journey cake, cornmeal, bread with nuts, and succotash. Everyone ate outdoors at big tables. Okay, so now we see, you know, that's if you just go with that narrative in and of itself alone, you know, that's just a thanksgiving to God, right? But let's look at some of these things and look at some more of the origins of it, though. So, give me one moment. I want to show you something. Give me one moment. And we can look at the origins of this day. Here we go. All right, so we look at the origins of Thanksgiving. This is also from an article from World Book Encyclopedia 1942 concerning the origins of Thanksgiving. It says Thanksgiving Day in the United States and Canada, a day set apart for the giving of thanks to God for the blessings of the year. But then it says originally it was a harvest Thanksgiving. And while the purpose has become less specific, the festival still takes place late in autumn after the crops have been gathered. Indeed, it is probably an outgrowth of the harvest home celebrations in England. Okay, so it's not like they came here and this was the first Thanksgiving. That's just some spot. It's often told as if, you know, the first time that ever happened, it was spontaneous and it's just something that they did, just giving thanks for survival. But that's not actually the case. Yeah, they would do it, but ultimately it grew out of something that particular thing that they did was already taking place. They did it in their homeland. So it said, indeed, it is probably an outgrowth of the harvest home celebrations in England. Such celebrations are of very ancient origin, being nearly universal among primitive peoples. See, pagans dealt with harvest festivals and they dealt with certain gods during this time. Let me just show you something. The cornucopia. This is the symbolism that you often see during Thanksgiving. You ever ask yourself where this came from? Many people have never even heard of the term, but you've seen this. You see it every Thanksgiving. Well, let's see the origin of it. Okay, this is from Carter. It says many of the images commonly associated with Thanksgiving are derived from much older traditions of celebrating the autumn harvest. For example, the cornucopia, a horn-shaped basket overflowing with fruits and vegetables, is a typical emblem of Thanksgiving abundance that dates to ancient harvest festivals. See, these are things that they were already doing. Many communities also decorate their churches with fruits, flowers, and vegetables at Thanksgiving, much as European communities have for centuries during the autumn harvest festival. This is nothing new. And let's look at this. So this imagery here of the cornucopia is Latin for horn of plenty in Greek mythology. One of the horns of the goat of Almathea, which was caused by Zeus to refill itself indefinitely with food and drink. That's supposed to be little Zeus right there getting nourished from this horn. In paintings, the cornucopia is depicted as a horn-shaped container spilling over with fruit and flowers. So I just wanted to show you that because ultimately, brothers and sisters, you know, this day that we're embarking upon, where everybody's gonna get fat and drunk and unbutton their belt and watch some football, and then the next day they're gonna gather up the strength 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and run out and buy some stuff they don't need on Black Friday. Act a fool. I think it's telling of the mindset of people that you would deal with this day, but you don't deal with the feast of the Lord. Let's go to the book of Colossians. You know, that's the mindset of man. And that's why, quite frankly, so many people are on their way to hell. Because you discount what God has set forth for some folly. This is Colossians 2. We want to pick it up at verse 16. Colossians 2 and verse 16, it reads, "Let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of an holy day, or of the new moon or of the Sabbath days." Now, this is not talking about Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter. This is talking about the feast of the Lord. Okay, so now he's telling this congregation that in Colossae, he's telling them, hey, don't let anybody judge you in these things, right? Because they were dealing with all the paganism that they at one time that everybody else was, and now they're coming to the truth of God's feast days, and they say, hey, don't let anybody judge you in these things. And that's how true believers should be today, right? How you gonna take up Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter This is hypocrisy. If you say you believe in God, you're doing it for God, but the days he gave, you don't deal with. And then it says something. He says, which are a shadow of things to come, but the bodies of Christ, because they outline a plan of salvation for man. That's what they do. Let's see what he laid out these days. Let's go to Leviticus, the 23rd chapter. Leviticus, the 23rd chapter. And then really when you look at these days from a practical sense, ultimately it led to the genocide of indigenous people. If they knew what they know now, they would have dealt with them people getting off the boat. They would have ran out to the water before they even hit shore dealing with them people, if they would have known what it was going to lead to. Leviticus, straight savagery. Leviticus 23 and verse 1, it says, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them concerning the feast of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations. Even these are my feasts. Right? So he has feasts, brothers and sisters. He has, first of all, he has the weekly Sabbath. Then he has the annual Sabbath, Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, Feast Pentecost, a memorial blowing of trumpets, Day of Atonement, Tabernacles. These are the days that he gave. These are the days that Jesus observed. These are the days that Paul and the apostles observed. These are the days that the early Christians, like we're reading about in the Colossians, that they observed. They weren't dealing in this foolishness with Easter and Christmas. Let's go to Matthew, the 15th chapter, and see what he says about just you making up things and what it's going to get you. This is Matthew 15 and verse 9. Matthew 15 and verse 7. Because here, the Pharisees and the scribes came to Jesus, and they asked about his disciples and why they transgressed the tradition of the elders, for they wash not their hands when they eat bread. They worried about some tradition, right? Like Thanksgiving is simply a tradition. Christmas is a tradition of men. Even in this country, it was illegal to even deal with Christmas because it was quite clear the pagan origins. But nevertheless, in verse 7, it says, Jesus says, ye hypocrites, because they worried about some tradition, and in dealing in that tradition, let me just read it. Verse 15 and 1, it said, Matthew 15 and 1, it says, then it came to Jesus, scribes and Pharisees, which were of Jerusalem, saying, why do thy disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? For they wash not their hands when they eat bread. So they worried about some tradition, right? Like people, they worried about Thanksgiving. They were worried about that tomorrow. They went to the store, they, got all the cranberry sauce and batter, stovetop and stuffing, and getting turkeys and all this foolishness. But you didn't make the same preparations for the feast that he commanded you to keep. See, you weren't commanded to keep Thanksgiving. You were commanded to observe the feast of the Lord. So it says in verse 3, he said, but he answered and said unto them, why do ye also transgress or break the commandment of God by your tradition? You ain't thinking about God. But you saying this is for God. I got a Thanksgiving. I'm going to thank him for all he did. Why don't you just do what he said to do? This is the day. They try to make this day out so holy. This is foolishness. It said, for God commanded, saying, honor thy father and mother, and he that curseth father or mother, let him die the death. But ye say, whosoever shall say to his father or mother, it is a gift, but whatsoever thou mightest be profited by me, and honor not his father or mother, he shall be free. Thus have you made the commandment of God of none effect by your tradition. Just like they made the commandment of God of none effect by their traditions, the traditions of men, they did it in that. But they disregarded what God gave them. So it said, ye hypocrites, well did Isaiah prophesy of you, saying, this people drive not unto me with their mouth and honoreth me with their lips. He said, but their heart is far from me. Because in the Torah, he gives us what we should do. But how are you close to him when you not doing what he said and you making up your own thing? You don't read it. You don't read anything about Thanksgiving. You can spend it all you want. He said, but in vain they do worship me. It means for nothing. They do worship me, teaching for doctrines, the commandments of men. We're going to do it in the spirit. The Bible says, try the spirits to see if they be of God. Why don't you just do what he said to do? It's just that simple. John 4. John 4. This is something you need to understand about God. John 4 and verse 24. John 4 and verse 24. The Messiah says, God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. His word is truth. His law is the truth. He showed you what you should do as far as your worshiping of him, and we don't read anything about Thanksgiving. Let's go to Zechariah. Because in all this folly people dealing in, right now. I was in the store the other day. This man in the store, he wished everybody in the store happy Thanksgiving. He going up there, happy Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving. Man, go sit down. Get your groceries and go home. What about some Thanksgiving? All the bloodshed that it took to establish this country, you talk about some Thanksgiving. Even if you go with the common narrative, it's stupid. You destroy all these people, right? From one coast, eventually from one coast to the very other. Put them on reservations that you actually own. And then before that, you enslaved them, because indigenous people were the first people enslaved here. Then you sent a whole bunch of criminals here, because again, the common narrative is that America was founded by people who were being persecuted religiously. Yeah, you had a small sect that were, but so many. Listen, like Australia, what the British did with Australia, where they sent all their criminals there. Read Capitalism and Slavery by Eric Williams. He talks about that, how they sent all their criminals to the colonies in the Americas. Even Benjamin Franklin was saying it's like sending a bunch of vipers to a place. I mean, all these criminals. That's what America was. And so you send your poor because there's no opportunity. It was burned up, basically. There's no resources. It's a terrible place to live for the vast majority of its inhabitants. And Christopher Columbus's journey, his so-called quote-unquote discovery, opened the door, paved the way for much of the colonialism and the slavery you see in the North, Central, and South Americas. So they come here and as indentured servants, and they work in conditions similar to slavery. They can't enslave the indigenous people. You can't do it. They know the terrain, and in addition to knowing the terrain, they just weren't built. They just weren't built for that, as far as their fortitude, as far as the body as well as their mind. They die. One good. You even saw that in the Caribbean among the Arawak and other people, okay, that were enslaved, the indigenous peoples. They would not last. So they dealt with indigenous servants in these colonies in America. They served in a type of slavery for 7 years or more. And then what they did, they started bringing those of the diaspora here. So I say all that to say, you wipe out a whole group of people, and then you wipe out the indigenous people. You wipe out a whole group of people, enslave another group of people for 100 years, subject them to all kinds of atrocities. Then once you build up your strength from having a foundation or economic genesis of empire through slavery, right? You go throughout the world as a conquering empire. Well, really after World War II, after you drop 2 atomic bombs, you feel a power void that was left when Germany and Britain were destroyed in much of Europe, and you rose up, and now you're the superpower. Now you go throughout the world wreaking havoc, toppling governments, right? You're doing all these things in the name of empire, in the name of democracy, destroying people's drone attacks, all these atrocities. You want to talk about morality? Biggest hypocrites in the world. Biggest hypocrites in the world. Talk about you some beacon of light. No, you are immoral in a decadent society that is crumbling. You can tell this is a waning empire. It's got she's got so much blood on her hands all over the world. People keep talking, they still talking about. I saw something just before I came here. I was watching a video, and in a commercial was some movie coming out, and it's some armed forces of the United States, and they looking at 9/11, and they say, you know, fighting with a purpose and all this. It's propaganda, like most of these shows are, most of these movies are. But you don't, so yeah, that would be okay. If you want to go with the narrative that these hijackers did that, let's hypothetically say that. I don't necessarily believe that, but let's say that happened. Okay, you go over Iraq over under false pretenses. You got the Secretary of War was it General Colin Powell? He over there showing cartoon drawings of what Saddam Hussein has, and you go over there and you destroy that country, and 1 million plus civilians die. So you talking about the towers? What about the 1 million plus civilians? What about all the civilians in these drone attacks in Afghanistan and these other places? So you got hundreds of bases all over the world. All that, all I'm saying, but you're going back to the genesis or the origin of this country. You're talking about some Thanksgiving. But what has this country really done to the world? It's got a lot of blood on the hands. Unjustly. And you got our people, so victims of America, celebrating that. That is asinine. It's asinine for us to celebrate that. Why would you celebrate? But Negroes just want a day off. This isn't it, you know, this is, I heard somebody say, well, he wasn't gonna knock it. Thanksgiving, even though he don't deal with it, he said, because this is a day to deal with family. This is a way, you know, people can deal with family. Listen, first of all, we need to start thinking collectively anyway, thinking about family and community anyway. We've gotten away from that in general. We need to get back to that for mere survival. Secondly, how about we deal with our families on the day that he commanded us to? Because when it's all said and done, brothers and sisters, people are going to be dealing with his days. They're not going to be dealing with Thanksgiving and Easter. This is Zechariah 14, and we'll pick it up at verse 9. Zechariah 14 and verse 9. It says, and the Lord shall be king over all the earth, and that day shall there be one Lord, and his name one. So this is the return of the Messiah. He's going to establish his kingdom here on this earth. And he says something here. He says in verse 16, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. See, you ain't going up there to keep Thanksgiving. You ain't going up there to make a turkey and put dressing in it and eat some chitlins. See, that's what Negroes gonna do tomorrow. Negroes gonna sit around getting drunk, talking crazy, watching football, eating, being a glutton, eating unclean things, greens cooked with ham hocks, chitlins. You're going to put some hot sauce on. That's what you're going to do tomorrow. You're going to loosen that belt up, loosen that button up, gain about 5 pounds, sit down, pass gas, and watch the game. Talk crazy to your relatives. And then get up and go into further debt. That's another thing about Black Friday. You know, somebody's telling me about, you know, because they call themselves making fun of me because I never owned a pair of Jordans. I said, yeah, I never owned a pair. My mother taught me one of the best lessons as a young person, because I wanted a son when I was a young man. I'm talking young. I was a boy, and she said, she saw the price. They twice that now, but she saw the price. She said, boy, I'll go work every day and I don't wear shoes that cost this much. I'll give you $40. $40 for some shoes back then. I'm not that old, so $40 didn't really buy you much. And I got made fun of. But it showed me that developed tough skin. Now when you get to a point where you can afford it, I would never buy those shoes. And you know, and I made the point, when you look at the wealth of the black family, it's about $5,000. Compared to a white family, it's 20 times more, 120,000 of wealth. I'm not talking about income. I'm talking about wealth. When you look at what we own, you look at actual wealth, it's minuscule. People talk about the $1 trillion spending power, but Negroes, what do? They go buy Jordans. See, we don't really have wealth. And it shows us that biblically as well, as far as what we would be. So ultimately, we shouldn't be out here in these stores buying anything. We shouldn't be going. I'm talking about buying these for these pagan days. That's what I'm talking about. We going to buy some everything, going into debt to help support this system, to buy these things so we can worship falsely. But there's going to come a time where it says in verse 16, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. And it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, that's at that time the Lord of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain. And if the family of Egypt go not up and come not, that have no rain, there shall be the plague, wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. See, that's one of the feasts we were commanded to keep. He said, oh, you're going to keep it. Otherwise, you're going to feel that plague. You're going to keep it. Otherwise, you're going to feel no rain. You're going to feel death. I want to go to, let's go to Acts. Let's go to the book of Acts. And I just want to show you something. This is Acts the 19th chapter. Because ultimately, brothers and sisters, these pagan days are all about making money. And you see the similar thing in this account. This is Acts the 19th chapter. So, like I said, people gonna get fat tomorrow, and then they're gonna go out and shop. I remember I had already graduated from college, but I had went back to school, so I was working about 3 different jobs. And one of the jobs required you, it wasn't on the Sabbath. I didn't work on the Sabbath, but it required us to be at the job at like 3 o'clock in the morning because people were coming in for these days. And it was just some little cheap shoe store I was working. One of the jobs I was working at while I was going to school. I said, man, this is foolishness. People are they are in a, you know, in a frenzy over some stuff that's been sitting there all year long. It's been sitting there all year long. But sometimes they'll mark up the price. Now, sometimes you'll get a good deal. But people just crazy. They've created a frenzy. Let's go to, so then this is Acts 19 and verse 23. It says, and the same time there arose no small stir about that way. For a certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith, which made silver shrines for Diana. Okay, now Diana was in the Greek, that was Artemis. Okay, that's the goddess of the moon and the outdoors and fertility. Okay, so he making these shrines for this goddess. So it said Demetrius, a silversmith, which made silver shrines for Diana, brought no small gain unto the craftsmen. Meaning, they making a whole lot of money. Just like they making a whole lot of money on Black Friday and around this time. It said, whom he called together with the workmen of like occupation. It says, sirs, ye know that by this craft we have our wealth. I was talking about wealth earlier. These companies, they getting all this money off of you go to work, get peanuts, you spend a little money you have to get this stuff you don't need, making somebody else wealthy. You know one thing, listen, side note, we need to actually see when we truly operate as the people that are in the book, and we have a culture based on the Torah or the instruction that was given to us, out of that culture, ultimately, brothers and sisters, we could actually create our own economy. We could create our own economy independent of all these other people who hate us, who either oppress us or either come into our communities and exploit us and sell us poison, sell us things we don't need. See, we can actually use the law of God, which automatically creates a culture, because it shows you how to operate. It shows you how to walk, how to talk, how to dress, how to eat. And out of that, we could create our own economy. That's what we could do. But nevertheless, that's something else. But it says, whom he called together with I'm in verse 25. Whom he called together with the workmen of like occupation. It says, sir, we know that by this craft we have our wealth. Moreover, ye see and hear that not alone at Ephesus, but almost throughout all Asia, this Paul hath persuaded and turned away much people, saying that they be no gods, which are made with hands. See, and Paul was telling them that this is foolishness. These are not gods, and they upset. It's just like, now just imagine if all the millions of our people say, you know what? We're not dealing with Christmas. We're not spending a dime. Oh, they'd have to get to the bottom of that, because we're some of the biggest. We don't produce, even though we used to actually be great inventors for a short time after slavery. But we don't produce, and we had businesses, and they came and destroyed those businesses. But we are great consumers. But just think if we did that. Just think if we did that. Just say, you know what? Because we're going to serve the true and living God. So therefore, we're going to leave these things alone. Let's read this. Let's read a little bit more. It says, so that not only this our craft is in danger to be set at naught, but also that the temple of the great goddess Diana shall be despised, and her magnificence should be destroyed, whom all Asia and the world worship it. But Diana is a false goddess. Who cares what they do? It says that when they heard these sayings, they were full of wrath and cried out, saying, great is Diana of the Ephesians. And the whole city was filled with confusion. Having caught Gaius and Aristarchus, men of Macedonia, Paul's companions in travel, they rushed with one accord into the theater. And when Paul would have entered in unto the people, the disciples suffered him not. They didn't allow him. It says, and certain of the chief of Asia, which were his friends, sent unto him, desiring him that he would not adventure himself unto the theater. Some therefore cried one thing, and some another, for the assembly was confused, and the more part knew not wherefore they were come together. It says, well, that's good. I'm going to stop there. I want to read one other thing. Oh, no, I'll keep reading. It says, as they drew Alexander out of the multitude, the Jews putting him forward, and Alexander beckoned with the hand and would have made his defense unto the people. But when they knew that he was a Jew, all with one voice, about this space of 2 hours, cried out, great is Diana of the Ephesians. So these people are in a frenzy. Just like these crazy people are in a frenzy on Black Friday. In Walmart, of all places. Acting a fool. I saw one video, man, this woman, all these people going crazy over the toasters. They were going crazy. And this white woman, and I ain't saying that because she was white, I'm just making a point. This white woman, this little black baby, that baby was probably about 5 years old, maybe 4, had a toaster in her hand. She was with her mama, man. That white woman took that toaster from that baby. She looked at her face, she snatched it from her. It's like, wait a minute. I thought this was all about you shopping in honor of Christ's birthday. Right? That's what you're doing it for, right? You just gave thanks for all God's given to you, but he didn't give you that toaster, huh? You had to have that too. You've lost your mind. Let's go to, this is the last place. This is the last place here. Let's go to Revelation 17 and ultimately see, you know, when you look at these Christian festivals in general, ultimately, you could see where they come from, and you could also see, let's see. You could also see the wealth that is generated from these. Give me 1 second. Go to Revelation. We'll pick it up at 17. Revelation, the 17th chapter. Revelation 17. And pick it up at verse, I'll just pick it up at verse 1. It says, and there came out one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials and talked with me, saying, come unto me, come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. And we should know the waters, what they are. In verse 15, it says, and he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest where the whore sitteth are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. Now this is a woman, okay? And this represents a system, okay? It says, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of fornication. This is a spiritual fornication. This is spiritual, okay? This is false worship. So it says, so he carried me away into the spirit, into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. This is the reunification of the Roman Empire, and this woman is riding the beast. The beast represents, again, the reunification of the Roman Empire, and the woman is riding the beast. This woman is none other than Roman Catholicism, the Roman Catholic Church. And it says something here. It says, and the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. But it said, what about all the purple, scarlet color and decked with gold and precious stones? Because she's been made filthy rich off of what? Off of that bad doctrine that she's having the nations to drink. Off of that bad doctrine, off of all of that falsehood. That's what. And it says something, and upon her forehead was a name written. Well, I'm gonna read verse 4 again. It says, and the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. So she is a spiritual whore. See, when you're dealing in all these false days, you're dealing in spiritual whoredom. Okay? And it says, and upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Because ultimately, sisters and brothers, when you're talking about spiritual fornication, when you're talking about false worship, all roads lead all the way back to Babylon. That was the beginning of false worship in Babylon, and the Roman Catholic Church is simply perpetuating the Babylonian mystery spiritual system under the name of Christ. This is why you got Christmas and Easter, false worship. That's why you got the Queen of Heaven and Mary. That's what they are putting forth. Okay, and in doing so, and whether you call yourself, you may say, I'm not a Catholic, you're a Protestant, you come up out of this whore. She's the mother of harlots. And Protestants, and regardless of you Baptist, Episcopalian, Apostolic, Lutheran, all of those, Calvinists, all those are little whores from a mother whore, because they came out of, she birthed all those whores. I said that was the last place. I want to go to one more place though, because ultimately she's going to be destroyed. Now let's look at verse 18, right one chapter over, 18 of verse 9. 18 of verse 9, because Babylon ultimately is going to be destroyed. And when it's talking about this kingdom that's coming together right now, that's coming together, this reunification of the Roman Empire. You see it all, you see it in Rome right now. They just had a thing where they talking about all their militaries working together. You've had this in the works for some time now. And you're going to see, when it's all said and done, you're going to see them, you're going to see those powers all together, and you're going to see those powers in the eastern part of the world with Russia and China. Okay? You're going to have Western Europe and in the East. Those are going to be the two major powers. Notice America, you don't see America in prophecy. You got a lot of brothers walking around here saying that America is Babylon. America is not Babylon. America is not Babylon, brothers and sisters. But it says in verse 9, 18 and 9, and the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and live deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament her when they shall see the smoke of her burning. Standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment. Then it says some verse 11. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. It's over. The merchants, like we read about the ones that were dealing with Diana, you got some merchants today. But verse 3, I'll go up a little bit. It says, for all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. So they made big money off of this false worship. Isn't that why they call it Black Friday? Because that's when the companies, I've heard, they say that's when the companies, they leave the red and go into the black. Finally, after all year being in the red, they make the vast majority of their money at the end off of this foolishness, off of these false pagan days. But it's gonna be over. It's gonna be over. And I want to read one more verse. It says, the merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. For 1 hour, so great riches has come to naught or nothing. That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen, brothers and sisters, when it's all said and done, when the Lord establishes his kingdom on this earth. So you got to ask yourself a question. Whose side are you going to be on? Are you going to deal in this false worship? At the very least, research what you claim to believe in. Question everything. Question these things. Research these things. And I'm telling you, with these pagan days, you don't have to research much to find out that they have nothing to do with God. I want to thank you. And my prayer is always that you are edified.